All right, so I'm going to talk about 4 different situations in which people find themselves that influence their earnings and that have implications for their life outside of his work as well. And I'm going to talk about the financial implications of making personal decisions that people may not always think about from a financial perspective. And those 4 situations are, first of all, taking time out from work for a family situation. Secondly, thinking about graduate school and the possibility of furthering education. Third, thinking about a dream job, what I've called a dream job, a career in the arts or education, something that's often very visible, publicly visible. And finally, slowing down before retirement. Is that something that people can afford to do? And I have examples in each of these situations that I've worked on using MaxiFi. And MaxiFi is extremely useful in helping to make sophisticated simulations of the financial implications of various decisions. And out of today's session, I hope that you will take away 4 major points. For almost everyone, human capital is your largest lifetime asset. And people often think about financial planning as focusing on portfolio and investments. And in fact, as this says, and I'll repeat, human capital is for much of your life larger as an asset than your financial portfolio. Secondly, decisions that seem to be personal decisions, caring for children, caring for your parents, often have a human capital component. So they often have a major influence on your financial situation and your financial prospects. Thirdly, many expenses that we undertake, especially with respect to education, but I'm going to suggest in other circumstances as well, these expenses can help increase human capital, and it's useful to think of them as investments. And finally, when we're thinking about graduate school or we're thinking about college and we think about student loans, often we think about them as a burden. And I'm going to suggest that they have that the sizes of student loans and thinking about the financial implications of student loans is very informative about the investments, the human capital investments that you are making. And if I may, I will indulge in a little bit of a personal reflection here, in that I would say that I'm steeped in the human capital perspective, which I think was, if not solely, largely championed by a man named Gary Becker at the University of Chicago, who was my teacher, and I hope I learned well from him. Okay, so let's start with taking time off from work. And we're going to focus on the financial impact. And I want to emphasize that I understand that it may well be that when we're thinking about taking time out from work, the most important impact is non-financial. Benefits to your family, benefits to yourself, and naturally a financial model can't capture these benefits. But it can help you think about whether those benefits are worthwhile in a lifetime perspective and in a lifetime financial perspective. People consider taking time off from work for many reasons. And when they do take time off from work, there are different approaches that can be taken. So if one is taking time off to raise a family or for a sabbatical or to care for a loved one, one can take a leave of absence from one's job. One conceivably can work part-time, or one can completely separate from the job. And those different approaches have different implications, both from the perspective of employee benefits and also when we're thinking about human capital and whether human capital is maintained and developed or whether it deteriorates, depreciates. And when we think about human capital in this setting, where we're thinking about somebody who already has a job and a career, we're thinking about several different aspects of human capital. And we can think of a person's network, their professional connections. We can think of the knowledge that they have about their work and about their career and about the company that they work with. And we can think about the skills that they've developed that are applicable both in the company that they work in and also in the industry and the field that they work in. So when we're thinking about these different choices, leave of absence, working part-time, and complete separation, we're thinking about the implications that they have for human capital as well. Let's meet Cleo and Jeremy Smith. They're going to be a sample couple or a made-up couple that we're going to use to help us think this through. This couple is thinking about having a child, and I'm going to say they're thinking somewhat traditionally about having a child in the sense that they're thinking about having Cleo take time off to when the child is young to help raise the child, but they're not traditional in that they already know that even though they're not going to have the child until next year, that it's going to be a boy. And actually, I told them that it's going to be a boy, so it's not. They have no special skill here. But as I said, they'd like to have someone take time off from work to care for Daniel, and Cleo's job offers more flexibility, and so Cleo plans to take time off. And when we think about doing modeling with MaxiFi, we have to make assumptions about a lot of economic aspects of the world in which Cleo and Jeremy find themselves. So we're making assumptions about they live in the United States, so we're making assumptions about Social Security, which has a set of finances which are not sustainable with the current tax structure, and we are assuming that the system will be made solvent by increasing taxes and reducing benefits both, and that will happen in 2035, and the solvency fix will be divided evenly between benefit reduction and tax increases. We've assumed that if they are going to buy life insurance, they will stop buying life insurance at 70, and I've checked, and that's a simplification that has a minimal impact on the plans. And then finally, we're assuming a real rate of return of 0.6%, an inflation rate going forward of 2%, so a nominal rate of return of about 2 3/4. And these are figures that we set last year. We'll be adjusting them ourselves here in the next couple of weeks. And here's now more about the Smiths. They're both 34. Jeremy's an accountant. Cleo works in marketing. They both earn $80,000 a year. And then because we're using MaxiFi and because we're projecting Social Security benefits, and Social Security benefits are an important part of their financial situation, we need to know what their earnings history was. And so I'm showing you the earnings history that I've assumed. And they also have money in their 401ks, and they have a small amount of taxable savings. They bought a house that's worth $500,000. They have a mortgage on the house. This is the interest rate on their mortgage. And then importantly, we know how much it costs them to run the house. And that's almost, it's a little over $22,000 a year when we figure in their homeowner's insurance, their real estate taxes, the annuals, what we call minor maintenance, and then Sensible Financial projects major maintenance at 2% per year of the value of the house. So this is the Smiths. And let's think about what Cleo could do. She's thinking about 3 possible strategies here. In the first one, she will step away from work and she won't work again. So that's this first one. So she's not going to work right after Daniel's born. She's not going to go back to work after Daniel reaches age 11, and she's not going to hire any childcare. In the second scenario, she's going to not work at all in the first 10 years of Daniel's life, but then when Daniel turns 11, or sorry, when he turns 10, she's going to go back to work full time. And again, because she's at home all of the time, she's not going to hire any childcare. And finally, in the third scenario, we have her working half-time while Daniel is young, and then going back to work full-time once Daniel turns 10. And she will be using childcare in this situation. And so those are the three scenarios. And we need to specify how much she will earn when she goes back to work. And we also need to specify how much childcare will cost. So we've said that when she goes back to work full-time, if she works half-time in the interim, she will make $80,000. So her human capital will be preserved. And while she's working half-time, she'll make $40,000. And once she returns to work, she'll make $80,000. So her human capital will not have depreciated. But if she goes back to work in 10 years, not having worked in the interim, then she won't be able to earn as much. And we're suggesting that her human capital will have depreciated by about 50%. And then we have here also other assumptions about 401k contributions and employer 401k contributions, when they plan to retire, their Social Security start dates, the lifespan for which they're planning, and then Cleo's restart age, which is just after Daniel turns 10. And again, to motivate the idea that her human capital will be preserved, because she's continuing to do some work, she'll be able to preserve her network, she'll be able to preserve her knowledge and maintain her skills. And we could make different assumptions about perhaps she'd be able to increase her human capital, or that her human capital would change differently if she doesn't work. I've made these assumptions as just sort of very simple and straightforward. And one thing I would emphasize is that her childcare is going to cost as much as her earnings while she's working half-time. So her net after-tax earnings will be negative if she works half-time while Daniel is younger. Okay, so what she chooses to do will make a big difference in their financial situation. If Cleo just stops working, the Smiths lose half of their income starting right away. And that's a big change. And it's a big economic loss for them. If she plans to return to work once Daniel's a tween, once he's turned 10, the financial impact is small, smaller than if she works half-time. And it's, as we've assumed, she won't earn as much as she does now. But if she does return to work, then the couple can spend, or their sustainable consumption is substantially higher than if she stops work. So on this graph here we're looking at, we see how much Jeremy and Cleo and Daniel can spend on consumption in each for their entire lives. This is smooth consumption, as MaxiFi does, smooth consumption over the lifespan. So the couple can afford $19,000 a year if Cleo stops work. If she restarts work once Daniel is 10, they can spend $30,000 a year. That's $11,000 a year more than if she just stops work. And if she works half-time, then they can spend $38,000 a year every year, including the period of time when she's only working half-time. And that's substantially more than if she doesn't work half-time while Daniel is younger. And it's a great deal more than if she were to just stop working entirely. Now, to see how that occurs, we can look at MaxiFi's lifetime balance sheet. And MaxiFi's lifetime balance sheet tells us the lifetime value of earnings, the lifetime value of taxes, the lifetime value of housing costs, and other major components or major groupings of spending. And here we're looking at lifetime earning, or the lifetime value of earnings, for Cleo and Jeremy together. And so if Cleo just stops, Jeremy has lifetime earnings of about 2.4 million. If Cleo goes back to work at 45 when Daniel is 10, then that increases to about 3.2 million. And if Cleo works half-time and then full-time once Daniel is 10, then it goes up to about 4.25 million. So the difference between the amount that Jeremy earns and the amount that they earn together is the additional earnings that Cleo would have. So here it's about, well, I think I have it in another slide, so we'll look at it in just a moment. Okay, now their lifetime Social Security benefits are higher too. In this case, or as if I did the calculation, these are the benefits that they would have if Cleo just completely stopped. And these benefits include Cleo's benefits because Cleo did work before Daniel was born, and she'd be entitled to work benefits even if she hadn't worked before Daniel was born. So the incremental benefit, the incremental Social Security benefit, is smaller both if she restarts work and if she works half-time. That incremental benefit is smaller in percentage terms than the increase in earnings. And that's because, as I said, they already have 10 years of earnings, both of them, and people's benefits depend on their whole earnings history. And the lifetime balance sheet, when we're looking at earnings, is looking only at earnings going forward. Social Security, in effect, embodies the prior earnings as well. Okay. Now, we looked at a couple of components of the asset side of the balance sheet. On the liability side, or the spending side, taxes will be higher if Cleo starts working again. And they would be substantially higher if she works half-time while Daniel's younger and then full-time afterwards. And these differences are larger, even in percentage terms, are larger even than the increases in income. And that's fundamentally because income taxes are progressive. And couples pay higher rates for higher incomes. And finally, in the case where Cleo works half-time while Daniel is younger, there's substantial childcare costs. And at $40,000 a year for 10 years, we're getting close to $400,000 in present value terms. Now, if we put that all together, so we're going to look at, this is the lifetime balance sheet, and we're looking at lifetime income on the left, and we're looking at the work-related expenses on the right. So this is not the full lifetime balance sheet, but just the work-related expenses so that we can see the differences that apply or that occur when Cleo goes back to work. So on the income side, we see earnings in the light green. We see Social Security benefits in the sort of, I would call it a pleasant view, blue. And then the retirement account withdrawals are in the dark green at the top. And we can see that each of those is larger, and collectively the total is larger. And then on the right side, we see the work-related expenses, and the big one is taxes. The life insurance expenses are pretty similar. The retirement account contributions are larger in the half-time case, but not visibly larger, not so much larger as some of the differences on the asset side or the income side. And then we have childcare. So in both cases, or when I say both cases, I mean if she restarts or if she works half-time, there are incremental income and incremental expenses, but the net is larger for half-time than for restarting. So here we can compare the net income for working, for returning to work but not working half-time while Daniel's younger, and we see that net benefit here as of the order of $800,000 or so. But then there's a further net benefit if she works half-time of another 250,000 or something of that order. And that is the case even though her net earnings while Daniel's younger are negative. Let's take a look at that next. I'm going to skip that. So here we're looking at income over time. And this income is, this is the net income. So this is income after tax and after expenses. And the lines here are if Cleo just stops, and also if she restarts but doesn't work half-time while Daniel's younger, the income drops to the level, the net income after tax drops to a level of about 65,000 perhaps. But if she works half-time, it's even lower because they're incurring, while she's earning $40,000 a year, they're paying $40,000 a year in childcare costs. And then there are also the taxes, the income taxes and the FICA taxes that are associated with her income. So their net after tax and after childcare expense income is lower. But once she returns to work, because her human capital has been preserved, their after-tax income is substantially higher. And once they start taking Social Security, again, it's substantially higher. So we can think of the child care costs that they incur while she's working half-time as an investment. This reduction in income, we could think of it as an investment, and the extra income after, while she's working, after Daniel has reached 10, and then once also they draw Social Security, they get extra benefits. So those are the return on the investment. I'm going to now go back to the previous slide here, and that return on investment is the incremental, we could think of the extra consumption spending that they can do over their entire lives as a return on that investment. Now, suppose that Daniel is grown now and out of the house, and they are faced with the situation that Jeremy's parents need help. Jeremy and Cleo are now both 61. Cleo took the half-time route, so she's earning $80,000 again. But Jeremy's parents need a lot of help, and they're trying to figure out what to do. One of the possibilities is that they could hire a caregiver, and that caregiver would cost $50,000 a year, or Jeremy could take time off and take care of his parents, or Cleo could. And Jeremy volunteers that he'd be willing to sort of take his turn, since Cleo took time out to focus on Daniel, and Cleo thinks that there may be some financial advantage if she steps out instead. And she's not sure, but she thinks perhaps. And let's look and see. It turns out that financially, if they need to care for Jeremy's parents until they retire, that financially the three choices are all the same. In short, the $50,000 of cost is approximately equal to the after-tax cost of giving up one of their jobs. So if they knew that Jeremy's parents would need care through the entire 5 years until they retire, because they're planning to retire at 65, then financially it would not make any difference. However, if they're not certain, and if it's possible that Jeremy's parents might not need care, perhaps because they move into assisted living or something of that sort, then the caregiver strategy is going to be financially more advantageous because Jeremy and Cleo would be continuing to work and continuing to preserve their human capital. And therefore, whereas if one of them was helping Jeremy's parents, and then Jeremy's parents found another source of help, let's say through assisted living, then going back to work at, let's say, 63, they might find that their prospects are not as attractive. And that they might not be able to return to the same level of earnings. So in summary, maintaining the person who steps out of work, maintaining their earning power is an important consideration. And it involves keeping up network, knowledge, and skills. And it often requires childcare or other support. And I would say that in our practice, we have a lot of, we see it in a lot of cases, people who have taken time off from work, and then when they're thinking about going back, if they've completely withdrawn from the workforce, they find it very difficult to return because in particular, their skills are out of date and their network is much diminished. When we think about the benefits of maintaining the human capital, the earnings, the additional earnings is usually much larger than the impact on Social Security because of the factors that I mentioned earlier. Because people often have an earnings history, and because even if someone has no earnings, they still are eligible for spousal benefits. And there's a point that I've not made, but a point that as we've thought about it, and in our practice we've seen, if one spouse does step out of work, then if there is a divorce, that spouse tends to be disadvantaged because they've lost their human capital. But human capital is not an asset usually that courts consider when they're dividing assets. And then finally, even later in life, preserving human capital can be a very important consideration. So when we're thinking about taking care of parents and who will do that, or whether someone should take time out to do that, from a financial perspective, the human capital considerations are important. There is a big trade-off between family priorities and finances, and it happens in all relationships. And we can call it work-life balance, but more personal time means less work time, and vice versa. And every person in every family has to make this choice for themselves. If one has accurate financial information, it can help make the trade-off more carefully and more thoughtfully. Just deciding to take time off without thinking through all of the financial implications can be expensive, and people can sometimes have regrets about that. Okay, so now let's move earlier in life, and let's think about graduate school. And we have another example that we'll talk talk to in just a moment. But just as colleges, graduate school is an investment. We can think about the return as being financial in terms of higher earnings, either per year and also in terms of the number of years for which that higher return or higher earnings is available. Sometimes there are psychological benefits. People enjoy their work more. There are investment costs. There are tuition and other financial costs. There's the opportunity cost. People who are going to graduate school usually are employable already, and so they're giving up the earnings that they might have had otherwise. And finally, I would say that living costs are not strictly an investment because you have to pay your living costs whether you're going to graduate school or not. And if we think about financing, if we finance in cash, if we use the bank of mom and dad, as it were, that may distort or soften the investment perspective. We may not think as carefully as we might about what the investment really costs. And while loans are burdensome, and while they can have an impact on people's lives once they're incurred and while they're being paid off, they also clarify. I say that the at least the out-of-pocket costs are really front and center if you have to fund them with a loan. And if your lifetime prospects are still improved after those costs, that's when you're confident that the investment is worth it. So this is Kim Jameson. She's a prospective graduate student. She's 22, thinking about professional school. And Kim is very versatile, and that's helpful for our examples. So she was an organic chemistry major in college, but an English minor. So in particular, she could think about going to medical school, but she could also think about going to law school. And she has very simple tastes. She plans to rent an apartment for the rest of her life, and that's helpful as we do the modeling. Now, we have really good data on dental school, law school, and medical school. And so we're going to work an example with Kim thinking about one of these three areas. But while there are many more different kinds of professional schools, like architecture and psychology and social service and business, and there are academic disciplines, physics and chemistry and economics and sociology and arts and history, each one of those has its own tuition expenses, its own program duration, and its own prospective income distribution. That is income distribution once for graduates. And those are the important pieces of information we need to evaluate this possibility or this opportunity. Looking at our examples, we have dental school, which takes 4 years. And now I have information here from the Urban Institute on what schools cost. And it's a little bit dated, but it's, I think for the purposes of the analysis that we're going to do, it's helpful. Dental school takes 4 years, law school takes 3, and medical school takes 4 years of school and then 3 years of post-school training where earnings are lower than they will be once one is a full physician. So, and we'll capture that in the model. Notice that the tuitions are different among the schools, and then the earnings are also different. And we have, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, median earnings for dentists and lawyers and doctors. And for doctors, I think I picked internists because there are a variety of different kinds of physicians. But notice that this is the median, and the 25th percentile is lower. The 25th percentile is the amount that's earned by the group that is in the bottom, at the top of the bottom 25%. And then the 10th percentile is the amount that's earned by the group that's at the top of the bottom 10%. And there's a substantial decline here, you see, for all of the professions between the median, or substantial difference between the median and these 25th and 10th percentiles. And if Kim doesn't go to graduate school, we're going to assume that she's going to earn the median college income, which is $65,000 a year. Okay, so we're going to look at what the investment costs are here, and those are tuition, and we've just graphed them. We saw them on the previous page. Tuition sounds like a lot, almost $250,000 for dental school, but if we think about a 45-year working career, that's less than $5,000 a year of cost, or an 80-year lifespan after college, it's about $3,000 a year of cost. And then the second investment is foregone income, opportunity cost. So if Kim didn't go to graduate school, she'd earn, I think we said 55,000. I'm sorry, we said 65,000, but after tax it would be 55,000. So I'm showing income after tax here, and here's the law school median and the dental school median and the medical school median, like that. Now, if Kim earns the median income, then any of these is a good investment, because she could spend $19,000 a year as a college graduate in consumption for the rest of her life, every year for the rest of her life. But as the median law school graduate, it's a little more than twice, and then dentists a little better, and as a dentist a little better, and as a median doctor even a little better than that. Let's think about law school for a moment and recognize that in all three of those cases where we were talking about law school, dental school, and medical school, we were assuming that she funded her education with loans, and the loans would be substantial. For law school, we're showing that she would have borrowed about $300,000. However, and we're looking here now at her assets over time, and her assets here are negative, showing that she's borrowed money, and then around age 37 or 38, she's even. So she's paid off her loans, and then she accumulates assets thereafter. So these benefits that we see are benefits after recognizing the cost, the opportunity cost of earning less, and the out-of-pocket cost of tuition. Now, it's not such a great investment if she doesn't make the median. Here we're looking at law school, and if she gets the 25th percentile law job, she's pretty much dead even with a college graduate. And if she's at the 10th percentile, it was not a good investment. And I'm going to skip this slide because we're running a little short on time. And one might say, well, how could anybody earn less than the median? Well, law earnings, and turns out earnings in other professions as well, but earnings in the law vary by location. And you see here that Silicon Valley lawyers do really well, and DC lawyers, and LA lawyers, and New York lawyers, and even Boston lawyers do really well. But in other areas of the country, lawyers may not earn as much. And earnings also vary by industry. So if Kim could get a job working in the movies or on Wall Street or at Tesla, that could be very remunerative. But if she's working in human services or state government, not so much. Now, how does this help Kim think about whether she should make this investment? She may have a pretty good idea of where she wants to live. She may have a pretty good idea about what industry she wants to work in. And those factors will influence how much she might expect to earn. And then she can make a better decision about the investment that she's intending to make. It may also provide some information about how to finance her education, because some student loans can be forgiven to graduates who pursue certain career paths. Okay, so summarizing the discussion of graduate education, deciding about graduate education is complicated. You have to think about what you'll earn with and without it, the potential range of earnings, and so forth. It's not an easy decision. Future earnings forecasts are opaque. The world is constantly changing, but there's still some information available, and it's better to make a rough forecast than to make no forecast at all. And it's also useful to get an objective perspective on what earnings prospects are. If you have contacts already in the profession or already in the field, especially if they're new to the field, then you can get a sense of, at least a little bit of a sense of what earnings might be. That option value is important, but again, it's really important to be objective, because one can sort of wish oneself into thinking that the investment is going to be a good one. And finally, if you're thinking about student loan financing, that is very predictable. What will the annual payments be, and if you and think about the earnings you're projecting, and will you be able to manage? It's worth developing a budget and seeing if the loan payments will fit in the budget. Dream jobs. The stuff of the American dream, I say. Anyone can be a fill in the blank if they just work hard enough, have enough luck, and hang in there. So dream jobs tend to be visible. Often they're occupied by celebrities, or at least the people that we know of who are in those jobs are celebrities. Although not always. Writers and people in the visual arts may not fit in that category. For many people, the visibility and the glamour of the job are an important aspect of what makes it attractive. Everybody can name a big sports star or a movie star, and nobody knows financial planners like me, even though our careers, I think, are fun and enjoyable and desirable. And nobody knows mining engineers or airplane pilots, or there are lots of careers that don't have the glamour of the ones that we're talking about here. There's another component of the attractiveness, which is that it's easy to see what people in dream jobs do. We watch sports stars play, and we watch movie stars act, and that's the job. And again, for the less glamorous professions, it's not so easy to know what the stuff of day-to-day work is and how to get there. Excuse me. Okay. So what are those dream careers really like? And I'm going to suggest that they usually have low entry earnings. The starting salaries are not stratospheric. We know the stars, but we don't see the journeymen and women or those who don't make it. So that range of outcomes that I'm listing there is not visible. And also the people that we know tend to have long careers, but many participants don't. So let's look at the NBA. And here I'm going for available information. NBA players seem to earn a lot. The average annual earnings are about $7 million a year, and the average career is 5 years. There are the players that we know: LeBron James, Steph Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo. These are the players that have earnings above average and career lengths longer than average. But if you follow the NBA, you're going to know the names of the players that are making these annual earnings and having the average length career. The stars live big lives. It's clear that they're wealthy. What's not to like about this? Sign me up. 35 million by the time I'm 26 or 27. It sounds pretty good. And that would translate into a very comfortable living standard. Here I'm comparing a living standard for the average NBA player to the median high school graduate. I'm doing that for a reason, which we'll see in just a moment. However, those appearances can deceive. The averages are much better than the experience of most players. The median salary, the median, not the mean, but the median is 3 million or a little more, and the median career length is only 2 years. So there are a lot of players cycling through with very short careers and relatively low salaries. And then there are a few players, the most successful players, who have long careers and earn a lot. So if we think about let's think about not just LeBron, because LeBron's going to be okay, but let's think about people who are uncertain about how well they're going to do. Let's talk about Donnie Dreamer, who's 21, and he's thinking he might drop out of college and go right to the NBA because the NBA is what he's always dreamed of doing. He's been a pretty good Division I college player, and he was the best player in his state in high school. He's gotten some college basketball awards and some interest from NBA teams, and he can't wait to get there. So let's think of, we know what's going to happen if he makes the average, but let's think of some other alternative paths that Donnie might experience. It's possible that he could become a big star. Many undrafted players do, but it's more likely that he'll have a disappointing career or no career. And in addition to the careers with some NBA earnings and career, we've got a couple here where he doesn't make the NBA, never earns $1 from the NBA. One where he didn't graduate from college, and the other where he went back and finished his degree. And even though he didn't have an NBA career, he's making more money. And these numbers here, the 10th percentile of earnings and career length and the average NBA career length and so forth, came from the table I showed you on the previous page. And for me, the big surprise was that going to college, finishing college, beats that 25th percentile, right? Where the player has one big year at $1.7 million. And the difference is, of course, that I've got the player that earns the $1.7 million, then going back and earning the median high school earnings after he leaves the NBA. So, and I did that to emphasize the point that because so many people, so many prospects don't get there, it's important to have something else to do. It's good to have something to fall back on. It's really hard to get an NBA job. Only 3.5% of varsity players, high school varsity players, ever get to be a college varsity player. So I did a little thought experiment there, and I said if there are 15 players on a team and 10 teams in a league, that translates into about 5 players in each high school league who will play in college at any level. That's Division I, II, or III. And then that translates further into an NBA player of any career length now from roughly every 13 high school leagues with 10 teams in it, or every 130 high school teams will have one NBA player. So it's really hard to get there. And by the way, these figures down here, graduating college, are speaking only to the fact that the student's class has graduated, not that they themselves necessarily have graduated. Now, this for me was just the sort of the icing on the cake. a lot of people with successful dream careers don't keep their money long enough to enjoy the stable living standard that their earnings promise, because they have a hard time imagining that the success will ever stop, because because the successful players or the people with big careers, big celebrity careers, attract hangers-on, and in some cases they're happy to help the stars spend, and in some cases unscrupulous advisors manage to get hired. Fundamentally, the stars are spending too fast. They're overestimating how much they can afford to spend, and they're underestimating how much time they have to cover. Now, other entertainment careers are similar. The NBA is not unique in terms of the small numbers of jobs, the low earnings for many. And I looked here at entertainment careers, and I could get Bureau of Labor Statistics data for this. Actors, writers and authors, musicians and singers. And the 10th percentile of earnings is pretty low, and the 25th percentile is pretty low. Even the median is pretty low. This is below college. This is even a little bit below college. And even if we look at the 90th percentile, these are the people in the top 10% now. They're not earning a huge difference from college earnings. And if we think about how many people are doing this, there aren't very many people doing it. There are about 1,000 new jobs per year in each of these areas. Most of them are at low earnings. So the same analysis applies. Dream jobs are really hard to get, and in a lot of cases, they're not that great from a financial perspective. So if you're interested in a dream job, or you know someone who's interested in a dream job, maybe you have a friend who's thinking about a dream job, what should they do? And I make 3 suggestions. Plan B. What will you do if your dream job doesn't work out? Graduate from college. Think about alternative career paths. If there's an off season in your job, in your dream job, in the off season, keep up your network, develop your skills, build your alternative human capital. And then secondly, I say set a cut bait date. In non-sports careers especially, the development may take a long time, and success can appear to be, or you may hope it will be, just around the corner. And I suggest that you seek an objective view. Are the odds really good? And if they're not, then you're probably better off to go to your plan B. All right, so the last section relates to a situation I see relatively often in my practice. Often people in technology industries, but not always, are uncertain about how long they can maintain their current jobs. And they think, and here's sort of how this presents itself. People say, well, I have a great job, but I'm exhausted. I just don't know how much longer I can do this. They're running out of gas. They see a less demanding career as attractive, say teaching or consulting or nonprofit work. Less demanding careers are often less remunerative, but they may have non-financial benefits, and they may have different sources of professional gratification, more immediate feedback, or a personal view of the results, or something of the sort. So people in this situation tend to see themselves as having 2 big choices. One of them, work as long as I can and then collapse. So I'll work until I just can't stand working anymore, and then I'll stop. Or I could take one of these interesting options, maybe work longer, earn less, and probably be happier. And so the question is, well, what does that cost? So we're back to Jeremy and Cleo again. I call this the alternate universe. They've decided not to have children after all of that. And at 40, Cleo gets a huge promotion, and her salary goes to $250,000 a year. And her job is great. It's really, really fun, but it's really stressful. And by the time she gets to be 55, she wants out. And she thinks here that maybe she can make it to 60, but then she's going to be finished working. Or conceivably she could get it out to 65, but she thinks she wouldn't make it. Hang on till 60, then drop out entirely. Take a less stressful job next year and work until 65, or take a much less stressful job and cruise until 70. And again, if we think about the advantages of the longer career, more years of earnings, so more financial assets, and secondly, the saved resources don't have to cover. There are fewer years of retirement that those saved resources have to cover, and there are substantial psychological benefits for many people. Staying engaged, many people get a lot of meaning from their work. And I've constructed 3 examples. The first one is the one that we already know about, where Cleo works until 60 at $250,000 a year and then stops. The second is one where she earns half as much as she's earning in her big job, $125,000 a year, and she plans to retire at 65. And the third, she earns $83,000 a year, but she's planning to work until 70. She thinks this would be really, really fun, and she could see doing it for a long time. Now, I've carefully selected those amounts so that the total income from the lifetime balance sheet is the same in all 3. So it doesn't matter if she retires at 60 or 65 or 70, the lifetime additional income is about $1.5 million. And the net income is the same. So going back to the lifetime balance sheet and looking at the value of income, and this is now for Cleo and Jeremy. Here's earnings and Social Security and retirement benefits for retiring at 70, and we have taxes, which is the big expense on this side, and then the net. And you notice that the net is just about identical, and the components are just about identical, because even though the timing of the earnings is different, and the differences are due primarily to those differences in timing. The progressivity of the income tax, and then there are small differences in Social Security income because of the timing of income and the influence that has on the lifetime earnings and the primary insurance amount. But looking at this chart, it's hard to, if you squint, it's really hard to see any differences from a financial perspective. And it turns out that their living standard is the same too. So if Cleo could have worked in her big job until 65, then she and Jeremy could have spent $99,000 a year on consumption, discretionary expenses. But they've been spending conservatively. They've only been spending $75,000 a year. They've always been afraid that Cleo's big job might evaporate. And all 3 of the options that we are considering allow them to maintain that $75,000 a year living standard. Whether Cleo retires at 60, earning $250,000, or at 65, earning $125,000, or at 70, earning $83,000, they can still cover that $75,000 a year discretionary spend. So in short, and in summary, it's often possible to maintain your living standard at a lower income if you're willing to work longer. And that can be much, much less stressful. The non-financial trade-offs are really significant, and only you can assess them. On the personal side, with a less stressful job, you get more family time, more time with friends, better mental health, and the types of activities that you find meaningful. On the financial side, more financial resources means more stuff, more experiences, more the neighborhoods that you can afford are perhaps more interesting to you. So you're trading off those financial benefits with the personal benefits. And then as you think about how long to work, it's important to try to assess the meaning that you get from your career relative to the meaning that you get from your personal life. If you're working, you're going to be getting those career benefits. If you're retired, you're going to get those personal benefits. The more family time. If you're older, more time with grandchildren, or if you have grandchildren, more time with grandchildren. And a lot of people talk about giving back and about charitable activities. So here we highlight with a short high pay career, you have a shorter career and shorter work meaning, and a longer retirement and a longer other meaning. With a longer lower pay career, you've got a longer career and more time with work meaning, but shorter retirement and less of that kind of meaning. And that is that's a very personal decision. But it is possible to make the numbers work in moving from a high-paying career to a lower-paying career if you're willing to enable to work a little bit longer.